Welcome back to the Sound of Ideas from 90.3. I'm Mike McIntyre. Getting back into the groove of work can be tough after an extended holiday break, but what if you could enjoy an extra day off, not just at the holidays, but all year long? A full-time work week for most employees is 40 hours, 5 days a week. A number of companies, though, are experimenting with 32 hours, 4 days a week. This fall, Microsoft was pleased with the success of its 32-hour week with employees in Japan. Locally, the city of Newburgh Heights, just south of Cleveland, has approved a 4-day work week for its workers. Starts, I believe, next month. It's believed to be the first local government to do so nationally. Policy is scheduled to be implemented, as I mentioned, in February, was passed in the fall. We'd planned to talk about it then, but we were preempted by national news that morning, so we've rescheduled it, and now we welcome Mayor Trevor Elkins of the city of Newburgh Heights. Good to have you with us, sir.
Thank you. Sure.
We asked you here, though, and actually before the holidays, and now it's scheduled for today, to talk a little bit more about the 4-day work week. What was the idea of looking at your employees and saying they need to work less?
Yeah, well, look, I think it's culturally in the United States in particular, it's kind of foreign. We're conditioned, and we have been for generations, that the work week is 40 or more hours. Problem that we have, and we're having, I think a lot of communities are having, are the escalating expense of employee payrolls. And obviously that puts a continuous ever rising burden on the taxpayer to meet the needs to increase the pay rates of our employees. We are a smaller community, and although financially we're on better footing than we've ever been on, we cannot compete with some of the larger municipalities for personnel. So we had all of these hidden costs of turnover, and we had to start looking at ways to prevent that from happening, and we knew that we couldn't do it with massive pay increases. Because even with substantial large pay increases, we're still probably below some of our neighboring communities. Not probably, we're definitely below some of our neighboring communities. Their part-time employees make more than our full-timers. Although we pay fairly and we try to pay above the median, we can't compete. So we had to do something different to help us recruit and retain employees.
So that helps you recruit and retain them. The question from the taxpayer would be, are they going to be working less for me for the same amount of money? And there have been studies on the business side of things that productivity actually can increase on a 32-hour work week. What have you researched regarding that, and do you expect productivity to go down or up?
So that is the research, and that is part of what we looked at in this process, is that the information, the studies, we looked at in particular the Microsoft information, as well as a study from a company in New Zealand. But we've watched this in Europe as well. And we do expect productivity, and some of the numbers say it goes up as much as 50%. I think realistically what we saw was about 20%, which would put us right where we need to be. Some of the issues don't even matter as far as productivity because, for example, safety forces, you have to have a body. It doesn't matter if they're more productive during the time they're there. If there's nobody there, they can't help. So we are going to end up hiring additional personnel, particularly in the safety forces, the police department, to make sure that there's the bodies in place for an emergency call. In the end, what the math worked out for us in that with the kind of raises that we were particularly looking at to remain competitive and probably still lose and still have that turnover, we couldn't have done that. We couldn't have made that move, and it still works out to be the same or slightly less burden to the taxpayer.
In addition to the work week, you've had a couple of other measures that you put in place, which you might argue is to retain employees. Tell me a little bit about them, and are you trying to get a reputation as a progressive community?
Well, I think we're trying. I just think I am. I would characterize, if I was characterized, policy-wise, I'd be characterized as progressive. And what I view progressive is looking at doing things in a way that aren't necessarily traditional, and using new information and new models and new modes to be more competitive. We did implement a family leave policy that is, to my knowledge, remains the most robust in the country. We did that with the intent of trying to retain employees. We created a student loan assistance grant policy for neighborhood stabilization and to try and attract a knowledge-based population as opposed to an industrial-based population to kind of reinvent ourselves. And so far, at least anecdotally, it's working. So yeah, I mean we are trying to recreate the community, not in any particular political idea, but just with the notion that we're trying to do things differently because the world's changing.
I would imagine that your employees might react positively to that. What about your residents?
So similar to the family leave policy, once we explained why we were doing what we were doing and how ultimately by having a stable workforce that gets to know the community, that becomes part of the community, it ends up helping their bottom line as far as the taxpayer goes. They feel pretty comfortable with it from the feedback that I've gotten and been given.
All right. Last thing on the city of Newburgh Heights and the variety of changes that you've had. Latest is the 32-hour work week. Are there other ideas that are being considered? You just listened to a conversation here with colleagues that are in small cities that are not suburbs. Are there other plans that you might have for changes in policy?
Yeah, we're always looking at and we're always reviewing the way we do business. Nothing. I mean, there's some ideas germinating, but they're so small as far as ideas at this point that we haven't fully fleshed out whether we're going to pursue them. But we're always looking at ways of changing the way we do business.
That's Mayor Trevor Elkins, City of Newburgh Heights. Appreciate you coming in for a conversation today.
Thank you. Appreciate
it.
Yeah.
And we're going to take a quick break right here. After that, our arts and culture team talks with author and chef Jim Porterfield about the golden age of dining by rail. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Mike McIntyre. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.